Okay, let's just have a quick word of prayer. Thank you, Lord, for the continued opportunity to learn and to reflect and to share. Bless us now as we go into this presentation. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Church Finance 101. I recognize that a number of you are associate pastors and may not have full or direct responsibility for the funding of your church, but at some point you will have. Some of you as associate pastors may at least sit on the finance committee. So though you're not the senior pastor and have direct leadership, you're there, you're part of the decision-making process. And frankly, guys, whether we like it or not, the church is pushed by money. And your church program, in many ways, is as strong in reference to the giving. And there's more involved, of course, than just the giving of money. There's the fact that the giving of money in your church, both local and tithe, is a reflection of the spirituality of your church. Am I right about it?
Yes. Yes.
We all know that. That was no profound statement. So there is a reason beyond just financing why we must stress, encourage, have systems for, have a knowledge of the finances of our church. Excuse me. It's another way of measuring the spiritual level and depth of your congregation. I'm not so much today going to hit the spiritual end, though. I'm going to talk about the basic mechanics. This is Church Finance 101. I'm going to spend about 40 minutes talking about some things you need to be aware of, need to be doing to make sure the wheels, Richard, are turning. Because not much has changed since I came into ministry. And one of the things the conference expects of you, and in a sense holds you ultimately responsible for, is the finances of your church. And many a pastor has gotten into serious difficulty because they've taken this lightly. So let's, with that proviso, let's get going. There are roots to this. Let's read this together. Come on. And other Levites, led by Ahijah, were in charge of the treasury and of the house of God and the storerooms. So from the very beginning, early on, there was seen in the early church no denomination, and yet no headquarters except the temple. But as giving increased, then they began to realize someone needed to be assigned to be sure that monies were being handled properly. So the Bible gives us a little background. And so we have, early in the Bible, people involved in religious giving. You don't need to read these texts. Jacob, Abraham, both of them gave. And the giving that first took place, hear me, the giving that first took place was not so much in support of an organization, CJ, but it was more a devotion to an idea. The Lord is the owner of all, and we should return to Him.
And worship.
Yeah, it was an act of worship, not so much support of buildings and vendors and so forth. So this aspect of giving as a spiritual act, again, very basic, very foundational to the life of the church. So there's an increase. In Exodus you find giving for temporal and spiritual reasons, giving from the heart. Moses praised him for that, not just out of necessity. Again in Exodus, giving enough and giving as a commitment to mission. And let me just throw this into you before I get into the mechanics. The more we stress the mission of the church, the more we give people a reason for giving. And people have to have a reason. This is why you have, as Bill alluded to, you have a mission and vision. This is why you have programs, because it gives people a reason for giving. And again, that's not the purpose of this presentation today, but that's a part of the giving momentum. And then giving, of course, to support those who work for religious organizations. And I always laugh and smile that any pastor says to me, well, I'm not interested in the money aspect of the church. I find that a little naive, because you're living from the money aspect of the church. That's where your check comes from, is the money aspect of the church. So a pastor who doesn't take that seriously has been just a little naive, a little bit impractical. There is that aspect. This is how you make your living. So don't be so holy and pious and disengage from giving that you miss this practical aspect. This is how you want to send your kids to school, because people are faithful in giving. Okay, so it is evident without an explicit scripture that all of the increased giving of believers to the church, the temple, would necessitate some management. Hold that. It is also implicit, even if not explicitly stated, that the managers of these offerings had to be committed to the use and the purpose of these offerings. And one of the things that some of you have already been challenged with is that you've moved into pastoral situations where you don't have people who take their responsibilities with the money seriously. Now, we're all here together, and we're not going to take the response I'm about to get from you outside this room. How many of you sitting here right now feel like that you have a good treasury department in your church? Raise your hand.
Some drastic increase.
Okay. How many are not so sure? Okay, that's honest. I've experienced both. And my dear friends, there is nothing more frustrating to be the pastor in a situation where you don't have real confidence in the management.
Amen.
And at the same time, as you and I know, Jose hasn't been around for a while, you can't solve the problem by taking on the finances yourself or making your spouse the treasurer. You might as well take a gun and blow your brains out in terms of your career. So developing quality personnel, again, is not a part of today's presentation. I'm simply saying to you, you got to have that. Because as the funds increase, good management is key. Now, I have been blessed. I may have had one situation, small church in Mississippi, where I didn't have a solid treasurer. In fact, I found out the treasurer of the church was paying their tithe and offering to another denomination.
Wow.
The problem was I only had 2 members in the church. So the one couldn't vote the other one out. So we had to go with it. But there's nothing worse. So you got to have people committed to the use and the purpose of these offerings. Now, most giving in the early church had to do with the needs of the church family. But there's also a hint in 1 Corinthians 9:14 that giving for the sake of sustaining workers for the church was being considered. Gradually, over a period of time, centuries, the church treasury, out of necessity, came into form. So all churches in the Adventist church have a church treasury. You should be familiar as a pastor with what the church manual says about the duties of the treasury. You should know that. Read it, inculcate it, and make sure it's being done. It's there for you. And the key word, when it gives the definition for the work of the treasurer, they are a custodian. They are a custodian. Not a dictator, a custodian of the funds. Now, so you need a treasurer assistant treasurer or treasurers, counters, and of course in a lot of our churches now, the person who's entering that stuff into the system, and in larger churches, a controller, a person who's daily managing the money and taking care of the vendors. This is just a picture of the structure of the church. In order to facilitate the efficient handling and management of the church funds, other committees may be needed. They are what? Read.
Budget committee.
And?
Finance committee.
And?
Stewardship.
Okay. What's the function of the budget committee? Hmm?
Set up budget of the church, distribute the.
How is the budget committee formed?
From ministry departments.
My dear pastors, how is a budget committee formed in the Seventh-day Adventist Church?
Voted.
Yes.
It's voted.
Yes. Hello?
Voted.
The budget committee, if you're going to have one, is formed at the same time you vote in your officers for the term. And their assignment, elected by the church or appointed by the church board. Okay? Next, let's read.
Formed every
Everybody.
Budget time for every 2 years.
for budget for the ensuing years.
Okay? What kind of people would you want on this budget committee?
Business.
Business people, that's right. And you've got to use your wise pastoral influence here to make sure that a good budget committee is formed. Okay? Next, read. Reports directly to the finance committee or to the church board, whatever is desired by the board. Next, read. Once the budget is accepted and voted, the budget committee suspends its meetings. Now, you can make, Richard, you can make your budget committee a standing committee that still is available for the next 2 years or a year. Or you can dismiss them when they have sent the budget in, it's been accepted by the board and approved by the church. Okay? They only have one responsibility. That's to create the budget. Once the budget committee has created the budget, what happens next? Yeah, that's the way to go. I'm sure you know how we did it at CPC. All right, let's read. A standing committee of the church board elected during the regular church. Now this is a standing committee. This is a permanent committee. Any church that has any kind of halfway decent financial program must have a finance committee. Their responsibility is the monthly management of the budget that's been approved. That makes sense? Again, these should be key people in the church. And some ministry leaders, someone mentioned that, could be involved in this. Now, I don't mind having maybe 2 or 3 ministry leaders, not too many, because then they get to warring against one another in the finance committee, because every ministry wants to have its say. It's better to have more members on this committee who are not ministry leaders, okay, who can objectively deal with the decisions about the finance. Make sense? Okay, I think you're with me. So, sees the monthly management of the church budget, makes recommendations to the church board. The church board can overrule or affirm any finance committee action or recommendation. They're not the church board.
Yep.
They're a subcommittee of the church board. Okay? So here's the pecking order. Budget committee makes a budget. Finance committee manages it. Since its decision is to the board. The board approves or disapproves. But who has the final say? The church in business session. Okay, you got it. You got it. Now, folk, work the system. If you don't work the system will rise up to bite you. There's no area of church management and pastoring that will create more problems for you than when you're not managing the money through the system. Because ultimately, if it really goes sour, it's your leadership that gets questioned. Am I making sense? Okay. So this process needs to be followed. Read the last one. The pastor or an elder, come on, everybody read. The pastor and elder or any responsible person can chair this committee as voted by the church or church board. I prefer not to chair the finance committee. Why?
Conflict of interest.
Conflict of interest, you're too close to the money.
That's right. Because a lot of the things being recommended are coming from who? You. Yeah. That's right. That's right. Plus, when the pastor chairs the finance committee, it tends to mute discussion. Just because you're the pastor. You certainly want to be a member, that's for sure. But either the treasurer or an elder or any responsible person. Our president of the finance committee leader is a very astute businessman, and he's respected. The church treasurer serves as the secretary and usually shows the finance committee. How often do you think the finance committee should meet?
Monthly.
At least monthly. At least monthly. Okay? Any questions so far? All right. Then, this next committee is one that we don't see a lot of in the churches anymore. It's called the... Let's read about it. Come on. Elected by the church board for the church election time. It is a standing committee of the church board, just like the finance committee. And we don't have a stewardship committee right now at this church. We have a stewardship leader. The main responsibilities are educational and inspirational. It is the responsibility of this committee to teach principles of life stewardship, including financial faithfulness to the cause of Christ. Arranging for workshops and providing information are prime duties of this committee. Now, something we learned at CPC, as Cheryl knows. Now, hear me, folks. One of the most precious and fruitful things you do as a pastor is to provide information, workshops, and settings where your members learn how to use their money. See, if that happens, this will be taken care of. Does that make sense? Young adults, young marrieds, people just getting started, buying their first house, first car, getting their first promotion. There's all kind of workshops you can have. I remember we had the workshop at CPC, Cheryl, where we had a workshop. Your husband conducted it on how to balance the checkbook. You couldn't find a seat in the fellowship hall.
Fantastic.
They packed the place just to learn how to, and it was amazing to see who came. It wasn't just young folk. How to balance the checkbook. You know, there's a reason, folk, and I take no glory, there's a reason why CPC went from a church with $46,000 tithe, $2.5 million tithe over the years. Because we constantly provided resources so the members knew how to handle their money. We didn't beat them on the head about giving to the church. For 20 years, we lifted one offering every Sabbath. One offering only, period. I don't believe in rallies at all, as you now know, Anwar. I don't believe in that at all. Teach people responsible self-management of the funds that God has given them. Empower them and assist them. And then, out of that, they gain confidence that they can be faithful to the Lord without you twisting their arm. Am I making sense to you? So, this committee to me is a very, very important committee. Because here you can use creativity. You can have maybe 2 or 3 events a year. We just did a financial summit for the young adults here. It wasn't as well managed as I would have liked. But folk did come. And we had 4 different speakers dealing with different areas of financial management. And those who came were benefited. It just wasn't promoted as well as it could have been. So this committee is vital. In fact, I would say for some of you, you may want to give more attention to this committee than you have in the past. I'm very serious about this. You may want to give some serious thought to what this committee could mean for your church. And then, of course, there's nothing wrong with you taking the time. I see your hand, Alex. I'll get you in a minute. There's nothing wrong with you taking the time, or take a month, or take a quarter. At CPC, I took a whole year and preach on stewardship. Because stewardship is not about money, is it?
No.
What is stewardship about, y'all?
Lordship.
That's right, lordship. It's about life. And during that year, we preached on stewardship. It's in the record, so I have to lie. CPC's tithing that year was $300,000 in 1 year.
Amen.
Say it again, cousins, because they get it out. That's not a statement of boast. I'm simply saying to you folks that there's an aspect here that we may be missing. Teaching, encouraging, empowering, instruction. Now I'll let you have a thought.
I'd like your take on an administrative issue in relation to finance. Obviously, you budget for the year, or years if you like, and every now and then, of course, people have, or departments have, an inspirational event that they want to do. Obviously, it doesn't go from one month to another. So they write out a proposal. It has financial aspects to it. Your suggestion would be, does this need to be talked about thoroughly with finance through church board, or would there be an implementation of it being proposed first to finance and then presented as a matter of discussion for board?
Okay. The policy we had at CPC and the policy we have here, no kind of financial project is going to be presented to the church as a whole that's not cleared by the finance committee. And the reason being, church finance is a very delicately balanced thing. If you have too many folk, and ministries will kill your church finances and kill themselves and don't know it. Because the more little fundraisers you have here and there and so forth, the more you're pulling them away from the thing that Ellen White teaches in Counsels on Stewardship, which is systematic benevolence, which is people making regular commitments to the church program, giving it monthly without rallies, without fundraisers. And the more people you can get on board with that, the stronger over time, not quickly, your finances become. So that's the policy.
And I thought this was a good way, except when we were going through that, it seemed the other way around.
I'm glad you made me clarify.
Like, board has to approve and then send it to finance, and I was like, okay, well,
It's the other way around.
it makes sense that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So now in a small church, you know all these committees are not necessary. So I want you to know I know that. I know that. What's necessary, hear me, what's necessary is to be sure that these functions are taking place some kind of way. It may all be, you're in a small church, hey, the treasurer may be the treasurer, the treasurer and the elder of the finance committee, and the treasurer and elder and you, the stewardship committee, But the thing is to still be sure that 1, there's a budget, 2, it's being monthly managed, 3, it's going through the process of treasury to board to church, and that some kind of way teaching is taking place. Are you with me? Right. So just be conscious of the functions, even though you may not have enough people to have all these committees. Is that clear? All right, let's keep going. Now, the church treasurer. You gotta love them, or at least pray for them. Okay. Let's read together, come on. The church treasurer is what?
Custodian of the funds.
Not a dictator, and serves at the pleasure of the church family. Now, a lot of these small churches, I grew up in a small church. My Aunt Mildred Aunt Mildred, my Aunt Mildred was the treasurer of the Dale Wright Memorial St. Adventist Church for 53 years.
Wow.
We called her Amy Me. And, looking back now, Rick, as a pastor, I find myself wondering how pastors dealt with Aunt Mildred, because she owned the money. Never missed a month. The conference finally honored her. Never missed a month getting, in 53 years, never missed a month getting a report in on time. Wow. Did everything by hand. No computer. Come on, y'all, give out Millie. She was something else. Everything by hand. Those old big treasury, y'all know what I'm talking about. There's nobody old enough to remember what I'm talking about. Those big, long treasury books where you did it by hand. Aunt Millie, the bad sister, waiting on the coming of the Lord now, resting in Jesus. But she was kind of tough to deal with. And these smaller churches should run into that. The church treasurer should serve as the secretary of the finance committee. The church treasurer manages the counters, any other treasury department personnel. Now, in a big church, the church treasurer should have a team. The treasurer, the assistants, the counters, which need to be approved by the church board, responsible people, even those that do the deposits, all that. And the main thing for you is to know what's going on. You don't have to run it, but the pastor should not be ignorant of it. Right. Does that make sense? Let the folk do it. Let the folk do it, because you as a pastor, frankly, you want to stay as far away from the money itself as the east is from the west. Did you get that?
Yeah.
And I got a few rules for you on that in a few minutes. Okay. The church treasurer sees to payments to vendors, reports to the conference and church entities. The church treasurer and all key financial personnel should be, everybody knows what that means? Yeah, covered by an insurance that protects them and you if money becomes unfindable. All right?
In our church, or in our organization, is that automatic? Does the church have to have?
You should not take for granted that is the case. Find out if the treasurer's bonded.
And do they do it themselves?
No, the church organization can supply that for you.
Okay, so we just need to make sure.
Administrative management can supply that for you. Yeah, it's a fee, but there's some things you just do. You don't have a person handling your money that's not covered. You just don't do that. Not in these days and times. Okay, everybody understand that? That's important. I know some of you got several churches. It's more difficult, and my heart goes out to you, but you need to be sure you're on top of what's taking place.
So it's better that it's a policy, so that somebody's not, you're going directly to that person and listen, I want you to be bonded.
Yeah.
They're like, why? You don't trust me?
Well done, Richard.
Yeah.
Well done. Yeah. It should be policy. And a policy that's been hopefully voted long before you got there.
Yeah.
And that's already in place before you get there. Only twice in my ministry did I find that an important aspect. And because there's nothing, and I pray that none of you ever experience it. If you ever have a situation, pastoring a church, where the money gets funny and becomes absent, it can affect your giving for years. And that's why it's important that you be on top of this and pay attention to this. Okay? Now take that handout that I gave. Take this and go to the last section right here. Right here. I want to talk about your role. And I kind of pushed to get here. You can read this stuff. The pastor is what? The pastor has what next? That's right. And the pastor next should be what? Now, should be familiar. You should know. How many churches you got, Joel? 3. You should know. You should know. Now, you're blessed, you're connected to a large church, but even this still, in your role, you should know. what's taking, how it flows, how does it work. You should know.
Would it be too much to keep in touch with what actually takes place? For instance, when the counters came in, when they signed, the time that they counted, and so forth.
Yes.
I think this is
You should know the whole process.
okay.
From the time money is lifted in this church on Sabbath, I know exactly what happens from that moment.
Okay.
I know what the
Yeah.
deacons do. I know when they do it. I know when the money is counted. I know when it's deposited. I expect to have a report from the treasurer on my desk by Tuesday morning. Weekly. It was the same at CPC and churches before that. No, you should know the whole process. And you should know who the people are involved in the process.
Yep.
Okay? Please, Rick.
Henry Bell. A few years ago, there was a factoid that was running around in the North American Division. It said between the time that the offering is taken up to the time it is deposited, $6 million goes missing in the North American Division.
Wow.
I didn't see that, Rick.
Yeah, I remember that was kind of drilled into us for a little while, which emphasizes what you are saying right here, and that is, if there is built into the system accountability that every step is going to be monitored somehow, I have a feeling that money would not have disappeared.
I agree. Please.
We have established in our church, incorporated this security, because we realize that, churches are unsafe this day.
Well, this church here was robbed years ago. It was robbed.
And so
On the Sabbath.
we have people, aside from the deacons, who are really responsible with security and knows exactly where the money is at the time the offerings are gathered to the time that it is counted,
Yeah.
and then
We have that here. We have that at CPC. A security team separate from the deacons who are watching. And in some of our churches now, in some of our cities, these people are carrying guns. And if you got a problem with that, you probably don't want to pastor that church. That's the reality. You've got churches in Chicago, Detroit, New York. The security people, they carry guns. LA, they carry guns. And it's just the real world. It's the real world. Okay? Pastors receive regular reports, even beyond the church board and committees. In other words, I guess I don't know any other way to say it. You need to stay. Now that's my nature. I'm a melancholic choleric, so you don't have to push me to do that. I'm going to stay on top of the money. I know each Sabbath. Why? Because Pastor Henry Wright, I want to develop trends. I know what my strong Sabbaths are. I know what my weak Sabbaths are. I know what my strong months are. I know what my weak months are. You need to know that, folk, so that your planning is not something off the wall, but in the context of the reality of the financial situation of your church. You have to pay attention. Let's keep going. Pastor's rule number 2. Pastors should not get directly involved in handling church money. Never volunteer to be a counter, and I had to learn that real quick, because for some reason here, the folk here at this church, great trust in the pastor, and people walk, these older members here will walk with me on the Sabbath when I first got here, and hand me their tithe and offering. No. Thank you, Jesus. Come on, arms around the shoulder. Come on. Find a deacon, put it in his hand. I don't want to be connected with receiving money from members. So let me say it now as a rule. Do not be connected with receiving money from members. When I would go by and see old Sister Welch's, Cheryl, she'd always want to give me her tithe and offering, and I'd have a deacon or deaconess with me. Sister Welch's, thank you. Deaconess Smith will take this, put it in her purse. She'll see that it gets in. She's not going to say she gave the money to the pastor. See, you can't afford, you can never afford to have your name connected with the misappropriation of money. It will hurt you for a long time.
maybe forever.
Maybe forever. Maybe forever. Okay? So stay away from the money. Pastor should not be a signee on church checks.
Amen.
Pastor should inquire with the conference about the financial history of any church before taking the assignment. I always want to have a talk. Before I came to this church, I sat down with the Potomac Conference office here. I wanted a history on the giving and the financial patterns of Tacoma Park Church. I knew before I got here that things were in bad shape. And then you start thinking and praying along what you're seeing. Don't ever take an assignment in this conference when you're moved. Call up the conference treasurer. What's the patterns here? Is this a church? Are you inheriting a treasurer that's constantly late getting their reports in? You need to know that before you preach your first sermon. Are you listening to me? I know you are. Pastor should ask for a church audit if there's any questions about a local church's financial procedures. Just call for an audit. Bring in some objective eyes. Find out what's taking place. Now, before I get to that last slide, although I've been at this, I'm in my 53rd year. Here's something I've learned. I'll come right at you. Pastors who are not good at managing their own money, usually not good at managing the church's money. So I pray that I'm talking to a group that takes personal responsibility and accountability with your own funds. And the times I have had to deal, Rick, with pastors in trouble with the church's money, in every case, been 6 times, in every case, that pastor was in financial trouble at home. And the church's money became Now, I wrote the course. They still teach at Oakwood, called Pastoral Stewardship. I wrote that course. And the first 4 weeks of the course were on the pastor's personal finances. If you can't manage your own stuff, how are you going to manage God's stuff? Pastors who tend to make a lot of debt themselves are much easier to vote their churches, lead their churches into debt. Now, folks, this is not theory with me. I know this. These are things I've seen. Pastors who are more careful about their own personal finances and debt tend to be a lot more judicious about making sure their church doesn't take on too much debt. Summary statement: how a pastor manages the finances of the church are usually a direct reflection of their own personal financial management. So get your own house in order. Am I making sense to you? Yes. And the people will rise up and call you blessed. Because they know that things are in good hands. It makes all the difference in the world. So the pastor's role last. The church pastor should never borrow money from the church. Be assigned on church checks. Borrow money from a church member. Bemoan their personal financial woes to the church as a whole. Do not stand up in the church board and talk about how little money you make. Don't do that, folks. Don't do that. Don't do that. You know, get on your knees and bemoan to the Lord how little money you make. I'm serious, brothers and sisters. Yeah, don't do that. It does not accrue to you what you think it does.
Right. Yeah.
Now, if a church member at Christmas time or a pastoral month, they want to show you a kindness, receive it. I'm not too holy to receive it. Thank you, ma'am. God bless you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Thank you. Don't receive it. shoes, suit, whatever. But thank you. Be gracious. Thank you, brothers. God bless you. Don't go asking for it. Are you with me, folks? Don't ask for it. Talking about your kids ain't got no clothes for school and so forth for the board. Don't do that. Call up Dave Van de Veer. All right. I love you. So these are things that are very, very important. Now, here's what I've done for you. I'm not going through this. I'm going to give it to you. I've done up another handout for you called Keeping the Church Informed. It is 4 pages of information of the kinds of information, the kinds of systems you need to regularly have to make sure that the church knows what's happening with the money. Because besides managing it, you must also be able to promote it and share it. Here's some ideas for you. Take these, pass them around. God bless you. My session is over, and they're bringing the food out. Okay. Brother Rick reminds me, questions. All right, start here with Joe.
I used to have a mobile stipend at CPC, and how do I get there to a small church, or how do I, because I'm not supposed to ask the church for it. You can propose. How do we?
You have a finance committee?
I missed the question.
No.
Yeah. At CPC, and he was at CPC, all of the church, even before I got there, the church gives a phone stipend to all pastors. We do it here. Always get a phone stipend to help us because we're calling and so forth and so on. So we get I got much more in CPC than I get here, but I thank God for what I get here. So he's asking, how does he move upon the brother where he is now to do the same thing for him? And my suggestion is pray and hope. You may, the next time budgeting is done, bring it up. Just bring it up. As a possibility. They may consider it, they may not. Only suggestion I can make. Rick?
Henry, what would you say to the pastor here who maybe has smaller churches, and you talk about 3 committees? Could the finance committee serve as the budget committee, the finance committee, and
You may have missed that. And on my slide I said it's not necessary in small churches to have all those committees. Yeah, I did. Remember I said that? The thing I said, Rick, is make sure the functions are being carried out by somebody.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah. And by the way, to follow up on your question though, you could combine finance and budget into one committee. Yeah. I really think stewardship needs to be a separate committee. That can be a very creative, productive committee. It really can. But finance and budget can be one committee.
That's the reason why, in our context, in our church, we had the ministry leaders do the budget for us in our context. We had ministry leaders planning for our ministry, and then we presented to the finance.
Here's what we do. Okay. Yeah, here and at CPC, 3 months before the budget is done, Earl will send out a thing asking ministry leaders to send in their requests. And then we consider those in the finance committee one by one. Sometimes it will get the same thing they got last year, sometimes it will get more based on the request. Now we have added here at TPC the fact that your plans, your budget requests must reflect the new mission and vision statement.
Correct.
And of course, our 2 foci here are community and family. So if your plans are not boosting the community or the family, you're probably not going to get budgeted. But yes, we do that. We collect the budget requests from them and then consider those in the finance committee meeting, and then those are turned over to the budget group, and then that comes back. Yeah, so I see where you are. Chris?
What types of financial decisions should be brought before the entire church? Because I'm thinking,
Excellent question. Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, if you have your budget set and you're like, I want to buy a printer, it makes sense to bring it to the board of finance committee and then bring it before the board. But is something like that need to be brought before the?
Excellent question. Thank you for making me speak to that. Number 1, you need to allow the board. You need to have the board to allow the finance committee spending limits. Monies that the finance committee can spend without having to come back to the board.
Yep.
And then you need to have a policy for spending limits for the board without coming to the whole church. So what those things are depends upon those voted policies. Okay? At CPC, and here at this church, Finance Committee cannot spend more than $500. No, here it's $2,500. CPC was $1,000. Okay. But even then, you still want to let the board know you spent it. You never want to come across to the board and just, even if you're spending within the policy as a Finance Committee, in the next board meeting, the Finance Committee last month spent so-and-so and so-and-so, with just information. Keep everybody together. So vote a system of limits all the way through the system. Is that clear to everybody? Yeah. And let that be the policy. Now, while you're on that, let me just say this to you all. One of the things I have been very pleased with in coming to Tacoma Park Church, they have a list of policies that go back for years. Avondale Paul is a walking policy man. And they handed me a stack, little book, so that they have policies. And Adventists need to get better about doing that. Adventists need to get better about doing business in a business-like way. So if you're at a church and they've never done that, you may want to encourage, you've got some astute people, let them start, all those policies are in your minutes. Go back, collect them, and make a little workbook. That's the policy, financial policies of your church. That is one of the best gifts you can give to your successor. And it made things for me very easy coming to this church because I had all these. As soon as I got there, Avondale sent me all this stuff, and I said, wow. I mean, excellent policies that they've been running this church on for years, and they make sense, and they're observed. So just something to throw out to you. Any other questions?
One thing that we do at our church is that setting limits. I, as the pastor, also have like a limit. So for every little thing, if I'm getting Bible studies or doing this, I don't have to. I have like this petty cash account that once I reach $100, then I'll send those receipts into the treasurer. So it's not like every time I'm buying something, you know.
Each pastor had an amount of money in CPC, and here we just have a pastor's fund. Each pastor doesn't have a fund. We have a general pastor's fund. Yeah. And that's a good idea. That's a good policy. You hear what he was saying? That they've given him kind of a petty cash thing he can use well, so he doesn't have to call the treasurer. Now he wants a sheet of paper. And that's great. That's great. That's great. Somebody else, input. Okay, was this helpful?
Yes.
Okay, just mainly reminders, but in some cases maybe it'll show you a pathway through.